Well, if you ever plan to motor west, Jack, take my way, it's the highway, that's the best. Get your kicks on Route 66. Well, it winds from Chicago to LA, more than 2,000 miles all the way. Get your kicks on Route 66. Get your kicks on Route 66.
Thankfully, before arriving in Chicago, I had my fill of city driving with the scooter in Philadelphia. Otherwise, I probably would have been terrified going from the backwoods to the big city with Stella. The city roads going into Chicago were awful. I hit so many bumps that at one point my entire travel trunk flipped over the mounting bracket. By this point, I had already driven nearly 1,000 miles. But as far as I was concerned, my journey was just getting started. This was the first time I caught a stranger's attention. Some guys pulled up to me as I sat next to Stella in a McDonald's parking lot. Noticing my Pennsylvania license plate and all the packs on my scooter, they asked if I really drove that thing from Pennsylvania. With my mouth full of fries, I smiled and nodded. They mentioned how crazy I was and continued through the drive-thru line. God, I love that reaction. I am crazy. If you're never called crazy in your life, are you really living your best life? I don't think so. Today was my first day scooting down Route 66. I was finally cruising along America's Mother Road. I drove out of Chicago and south into the farmlands of Illinois. This was the most wide open space I'd seen so far. It was the first time I saw the windmills. There were cornfields for miles and no mountains to be seen. Where I grew up in Pennsylvania was like a painting, and the frame of that painting was the Appalachian Mountains. I felt as though I had finally broken out of the frame I grew up within. I stopped several times to look around in all directions. I wrote in my journal that it was like when you see the ocean for the first time. Squinting as far as you can, looking for a bump, a mountain, something in the distance. I would stare over the fields and see storm clouds many miles away. Lightning and dark clouds in the distance. I was safe for now, though. I rode directly south through Illinois, parallel to the lightning storms to the west. It was an awesome experience. When you officially start on Route 66, you begin to see all the kitschy shops and tourist spots along the way. I am a sucker for that stuff. One of the more memorable stops was in Odell, Illinois. It was very quaint and embodied the true Route 66 spirit more than any other place so far. Some more tourists came through while I was there as well. They traveled all the way from Spain and were on their way to St. Louis. They loved my European-looking scooter, but they called it a bike, which was fine by me. When you start on Route 66, you may be eager to stop at the first souvenir shop you see. Trust me from experience, there will be more. Route 66 was certainly easiest to follow in Illinois, and the condition of the original route was well maintained. As I approached Springfield, the sun was setting fast. I picked up some fast food for dinner and stopped to see President Lincoln's gravesite before stopping for the day. I noted in that evening's journal how excited I was to see St. Louis. It wasn't terribly far from Springfield, so I knew I could spend the afternoon in the city. I crossed the Mississippi River that day, which was a definite milestone. I was fortunate to have another perfect weather day. I cruised around St. Louis and made my way to the famous Arch. While at the top, a man proposed to his girlfriend. That was nice to witness. When you're traveling alone, any bit of connection to other people is a pleasant experience. St. Louis was a great stop. The Arch signified entering the West, another milestone accomplished. I woke up the next day and hit the road, ready to see Missouri. Missouri was beautiful. It felt a lot like Pennsylvania to me. A good portion of the original Route 66 is in Missouri, and you know when you're on it. Most of the time, I could stop at any point and do handstands in the street. It reminds me now of the Pixar movie Cars, and how this was such a bustling land that allowed so many businesses, families, and entire towns to thrive. But time and technology press on.
Gee, ain't it funny how time slips away?
It's funny the things you're willing to pull over to see when all you do is stare at asphalt and trees for hours on end. World's largest rocking chair? Well, I have to see that. My clock reached 5:15 p.m. on August 15th on my first big stretch through Missouri. The sunset was a few hours off when it started raining a bit. Then the scooter died. Smack dab in the middle of a forest. There I was, in the middle of nowhere, with a scooter that wouldn't run. I checked my maps and realized I had made a wrong turn. I knew it was about 7 miles in either direction to hit a gas station. I decided to go back where I came from and hopefully coast down the hill. I started to push. As I was pushing, a man stopped and asked if I needed help. I didn't want to trouble a man, so I said no thank you. He proceeded to warn me how far it was, but I said it wasn't a problem. I got the scooter running, but it wouldn't leave first gear, and then it would shut off after a minute. This happened for about half a mile, and then, much to my surprise, that man returned. This time, he returned with a pickup truck. He told me he couldn't let me walk the whole way and insisted on helping. The man's name was Toby Hendricks. We loaded the scooter up and he took me to his friend's house. They checked out the scooter and found the issue. They couldn't fix it completely, but he offered to take me out for dinner. Over our meal, we talked about life. It was wonderful to have company, and for a moment, I wasn't thinking about my scooter being kaput. I'm so lucky he was there when I broke down. He let me know the nearest garage to go to in the morning, which I did. The technicians fixed the scooter to the best of their ability with duct tape and silicone, and because I wanted to keep up with my schedule, I pressed forward. My next stop was planned for Springfield, but because of my breakdown detour, I went all the way to Joplin, Missouri. It rained a few times on the way. I was completely soaked in the late morning. That was the first time I got stuck riding in the rain. I was so cold. I was wearing shorts, so the cool wind blowing against me had me in complete shivers. I sang to myself to keep my mind off of how cold I was. I usually didn't sing the lyrics to any known songs. I would make up lyrics and put them to tunes I knew. I'd sing about a jerk who zoomed past me or funny things I'd seen. I would sing farewell tunes to roadkill I passed. I'd weave names of the towns I passed through the lyrics. It's safe to say my mind was quickly slipping into pure delirium. I eventually stopped at one of those conveniently placed Route 66 souvenir shops to dry off. I waited out the storm. From there, with the fear of another bout of rain or breakdown, I rushed straight to Joplin. The sun began to set when I was about 5 miles from my stop. For some reason, up until that point, I hadn't noticed that my headlight hadn't been working very well. Now that the sun was nearly set, I noticed. So there I am, alone in the dark, a little dim light guiding my barely functioning scooter in the middle of the United States. I arrived in Joplin around 9 p.m. As I was setting up my tent in the dark, an older man came up to me to chat. In my memory, he was a spitting image of Tommy Chong. He was an incredibly friendly guy with a lot to say. He loved what I was doing and understood it on a deeper level than most I talked about it with. I remember him saying he didn't think there were people like me left on the planet. I don't think he understood how great of a compliment that was for me. We walked and got some beers from the gas station and sat and drank around a campfire. I met his wife Nancy as well. His name was Victor. He and Nancy were riding their motorcycles from Sugar Land, Texas to the Adirondacks in New York, where he was competing in a kayak race in the beginning of September. We talked about politics, our trips, and concluded that we were like-minded. It was by far the best meeting so far with fellow travelers. In the light of morning, I was able to see a bit more of Joplin on my way out. That year, Joplin had been decimated by a tornado. 3 months later, and the path of the storm was still clear. Victor and Nancy treated me to breakfast. We parted ways and I rode towards Kansas. Thinking back now, it's incredible I made it so far. I think to myself, I was in Kansas? My God. Kansas was short but sweet. That 15-mile stretch was classic Route 66. The roads in Oklahoma were straight and long. I recall cows and fields, lots of fields, and no mountains. The sun and heat were beating down. My head was cooking in my helmet and felt like an oven resting on my shoulders. This turned into another long day, and I knew I'd be chasing the sun to Oklahoma City. At this point, I began skipping most tourist attractions. I feared my scooter would break down again, so I took advantage of any momentum I could get. I wanted to ride as far through Oklahoma as I could in the day. Stella was barely topping 45 miles an hour at this point, and the dim headlight was like a splinter of worry in my mind. The sun set, the air cooled, and I was coming up on what looked like a bottle company. I pulled over at the giant bottle of soda. Unlike the rocking chair 700 miles behind, I was no longer seeing the goofy, optimistic side of these roadside attractions. I hated that enormous soda bottle. I stood and I glared at it. I didn't even find out why it was there. I begrudgingly took a picture and puttered off to my campsite. It was in this part of the journey that I transformed from excited tourist to weary traveler. I was 1,600 miles away from home, and my destination was 1,600 miles ahead. I was as far from home and as far from my goal as I could be. Until this moment, turning back was always the easier solution. I thought to myself, when I leave Oklahoma City tomorrow, for the first time ever, I'll be closer to my new home than my old one. Tomorrow we ride. No turning back now.
But your thoughts will soon be wandering the way they always do when you're riding 16 hours and there's nothing much to do. And you don't feel much like riding, you just wish the trip was through. See, here I am on the road again. There I am, up on the stage. Here I go, playing star again. There I go, turn the page.